Hello and welcome to Alaska's Political Pipeline. I'm political reporter Will Portney, and sitting down on Zoom with me, we have James Parkin, the fourth, running for governor. Mr. Parkin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Will.
Yeah,
Glad to be
well,
here.
and I'm glad you're getting the chance to chat with us. Remind us where you're calling from today.
I'm in Angoon right now, which is my home community. In Southeast Alaska. It's a native community, Tlingit people, um, and I am adopted Tlingit and have a Tlingit family.
There you
So
go. Southeast Alaska is beautiful. I'm calling from Anchorage, so a little bit of a different scenery. So I'm a little bit envious of beautiful, beautiful Southeast. Let's talk about your run for governor. Let's just start from the beginning. Why do you want to run for governor, Mr. Parkin?
So I originally started because I was reading some news article about Governor Dunleavy and how he was looking at different ways to try and access the permanent fund, and I was thinking, this is not right. We need to, that permanent fund is important to to everyone in Alaska, and it's a real symbol of what Alaska means, at least for me and for the people that I'm running for. Um, and so I started looking at it, and I started looking at the budget in particular, and I just found that the budget was well, it just didn't make any sense to me. We have this spend it or lose it budget system, which incentivizes really inefficient spending. The only directive that every department is given is that they must spend all of the money by June 30th, or they'll be punished. Essentially, the money that remains in their budget will be counted against them in the next funding cycle, and so that just incentivizes, rash spending at the end of the year, and it doesn't allow departments to save. And so there's just all these problems with it. And I think that, regardless of how much we think is being wasted at the state level, we can all agree that a budget that says spend it all, you know, by June 30th, this kind of month by month or year by year kind of spending is not a good idea. We need a budget that allows more control for each of the departments to hang on to that money, to save that money, to invest that money, to think in long terms, to plan for the future. And I think if we can do that, we can not only save money, we'll just change the way that we think about spending in this state. And I think that that'll help to drive down inflation and high costs, because again, we're paying more for things than we really should, because we have no incentive to try and hold on to it, or even the ability to hold on to it. So the budget is the
Why?
main reason I'm running.
Why is governor the avenue you think is most effective to solve a lot of those problems, specifically about the budget?
Okay. Well, the governor is he controls how the money is spent. He writes the budget, of course, but the legislature approves the amounts. But the governor is in complete control of how the money is spent, and that's really where the problem lies. So I looked, and I haven't seen any example of where the governor has implemented any directive other than the spend it or lose it directive. And I think that that's peculiar. I mean, the governor should be uh, insisting on directives, particular directives for each department, goals that he wants the departments to meet with the funds that are given to them. Also, the governor has the ability to write AOs that would help to guide the departments in more efficient spending. And I have some ideas for communications network between voters and the state, so that voters will have input into things like major expenses, major purchases by departments that would require for the department to send out what I'm calling FARs, which is a feedback access report, which would ask the people, how do you feel about this expenditure? Are you for it? Are you against it? Or are you neutral? And do you have any input on this? And then, excuse me, then that information would come back to the department. The department would be required to look at that information and use it when they're making their analysis of whether or not to make the purchase. And that would go for all three branches of government. Now, I only have strict control over um, the executive branch, but I can ask for that same sort of thing for any new legislation, so that if there was a new bill come out, that FAR would go out to the people, and the people would give me their feedback on that bill, and I would use that feedback in terms of deciding whether or not a bill is going to get vetoed or not. If it has strong support from the people, then I'm not certainly not going to veto it. And if it has weak support from the people, then I might look at vetoing it because it's not in the people's best interest. It's not what they want. So,
Tell me a little bit about how your background translates to becoming an efficient governor.
okay. So, well, let's see. Of course, I was born and raised military, so I have a military background. I I have extensive education. I was a teacher for 30 years, so that gives me insight into our education de department, our education system, which is failing. We're paying, we're the sixth highest paying state in the nation for our education system, and yet we're ranked, I think, dead last in reading and very low in all the other areas. So we're not getting, and again, I think it's a product of efficiency in the spending. But I have this background in education, which is going to help tremendously in revitalizing our education system. I also have a degree in biology, which I think is very useful. We've got problems with our fisheries, with our king salmon. We've got these bycatch issues. I've looked over the research that's been done, and I understand it. I speak science. I understand what's going on. I'm not a layperson to that whole scene, so that's going to help tremendously as we're trying to solve those issues. I also have a degree in natural sciences. And again, that's going to be very helpful when working with our natural resources. And I have 10 years of experience in mining. I've been working for the mining industry for the last 10 years. I have a master's degree in technology, which I plan to use to implement those the FARs that I talked to you about earlier, and also something I'm calling ORs, which is a one-page accountability report. Those will be in common everyday language, makes it very clear to people what's going on, and every department will be vetted with those. They will have to show those to the people so that the people can see what it is they're accomplishing. But it'll be that technology degree that's giving me the skills and the background to know how that's going to be implemented. And I have a master's degree in leadership, again, which as a leader of the state, I think that that's an important asset. Um,
And let me ask about that leadership in the state. What do you think the state really needs when it comes to executive leadership right now?
well, I think we need someone who's going to be able to work with the legislature. And that's something that's very important to me. My lieutenant governor is in fact a Democrat, and I think that that's indicative of how I will approach leadership for the state of Alaska. I have every intention to work with our legislature. We have a great deal of work to do. We don't have time for partisan politics. Those things have been preventing us from getting things done in the past, and I want them put aside for those things which are most important to the people of Alaska, regardless of what party they belong to or any other personal attribute.
How do you plan to work with the legislature?
I just plan on being very direct with them, letting them know that I plan to, I have no intentions of vetoing anything that they put before me that the people are in agreement with. As I said before, I'll have a FAR that I'll know how the people feel about the legislation that they're putting together. And as long as they're mindful of what the people want, then I don't see that we're going to have any issues at all. I'm going to ask them for some things that I want. For example, in building the budget, I'm going to need the legislature's assistance because they do control the money. And so to be able to allow departments to do some of the things that I want them to be able to do will require the legislature to kick in and help me with that. And I hope that they will see the value and that they will be likewise inclined to help me. And I think that's the thing is we need to focus on what it is we're doing and not who it is that's doing it, whether it's a party or an individual. We need to say, is this a good idea or is this not a good idea? And if it is a good idea, then we need to get together and make it happen. And if it's a
Let
bad idea, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's a bad idea.
Let's switch over to policy a little bit. I have some questions about some of the top issues that we've seen from Alaskans on, different avenues that we've learned that these are some of the top issues. But I want to ask first, Mr. Parkin, what's your top issue this election cycle?
My top issue, again, is the budget. I also care a great deal about the homeless, and come back to that. But everything, the budget touches everything, and I think it's a very underestimated problem in our state. If we can get spending to be more efficient, we will be able to do a better job in all areas, and we'll be able to do things like bring back pensions and these kinds of things. I want to be able to facilitate everyone's needs. But if we can't get spending straightened out, then you can see how it's going to impact our work in whatever we're doing. Even if we bring a great deal more money into the state, which I have every intention of doing, and I have some good ideas to do that. But even if we bring that money in, if we've got a leaking budget, if we've got a budget that isn't functioning at 100%, we're going to lose some of that money too, because waste is a shadow of the budget. So the larger the budget becomes, the greater the waste becomes. And so we need to check it and then move forward.
Let's talk about some of these top issues now. The first being the economy, obviously a very visible issue for many Alaskans. The cost of living is very high in the state. It has been for some time. And then the state of the economy is also somewhat in a fiscal uncertain place. So tell me a little bit about how you plan to alleviate the cost of living for, many different parts of this very different state, and how to really address the future of our uncertain economy.
Well, I can't say that I have all the answers for this question. This is a tough question, and I think we need to bring our best minds to bear on it. And that's what I plan to do, is to get some of the people who are working with these particular issues to have input. Let's see what we can do. I mean, I have some ideas for what we can do to help rural areas. Of course, I come from a rural area, and I have some what I believe to be innovative ideas. I think we should look at hydrogen as a possible fuel source for the state of Alaska. We can generate it wherever we're currently generating hydropower, hydroelectricity, and I think we can use that to augment power in rural areas. I would like to try. I will try to work with the federal government to get back some of our land. 65% is held by the federal government. And if you discount all of the other holdings for our land in the state, it leaves less than 1% for development for homes. So is it any wonder why they're so expensive? So we need to get some of that land back. And so I'll fight to do that. First of all, I'll negotiate. And if I have to, I'll fight to get some of that land back. And then the land that we do get back, I will make sure that that land is used for young people who are trying to get a start here in Alaska. We're losing a lot of our young people, and I want that land to be available for them. I don't want developers to get a hold of it. I want it to be for those individuals, and then use the state's resources to provide low income loans so that these young people can afford to build a home. If we can get some of that land back, then we can build some homes on it. Just some of these kinds of ideas, some of these things that will help. I think that the dividend is a great fuel for our economy. I think it's very much underestimated. I think it's a bad idea when our legislature chooses to take from it to supplement its needs. I think that's a direct input to every Alaskan, and it builds our economy and it gives people an opportunity. I'd like to see it increase. Again, a product of how efficient we are with our budget will determine whether or not we can get that permanent fund to even grow. I think we can. And I think taking it is a bad idea. I also think that taxes are a very bad idea. If taxes work to solve budgetary problems, our our federal government would not be $39 trillion in debt. They have been taxing us for over 100 years. The tax continues to grow, and so does the debt. It is not the solution. If it were, I'd be okay with it, but it just simply isn't the solution. And it has a tendency to, reduce business, reduce, spending, which all affects the economy. It's just not a great idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you to clarify something for me pretty quickly. You said hydrogen, and hydropower. Could you clarify hydrogen and hydropower for me just pretty quickly?
Well, sure. And I'm not an expert in this area. I would call some experts in on this, but I think it's I think it's an interesting idea to use hydrogen as a fuel source. There are some diesel engines that have been retrofitted to run on hydrogen. And a lot of communities have hydrogen powered electricity. And we could possibly take those and have them refitted to run off hydrogen. We could produce the hydrogen here locally in state. So we wouldn't have to ship it in or ship it out to be processed, to be brought back in. And I think we ought to look at, processing our own oil for fuel too. But
The only reason I asked is because you said hydrogen and hydropower. Hydropower is water, and hydrogen is not water. So I just want to make
okay,
sure. Are you talking about hydropower or hydrogen or both or neither or
I am talking about hydrogen, the
hydrogen?
gas.
Okay, okay. I
Yes.
I just wanted to
But
clarify that.
interestingly, generally generated by hydro power.
There you go. Let's switch over a little bit to talk about public safety. Obviously, very different in all these different parts of Alaska, very different public safety concerns. How do you plan to really address a lot of these very different public safety concerns? And is there one particular public safety concern that is top of mind for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the homeless issue. I think we've been very inefficient at how we handle that. We have many organizations all working on pretty much on their own to try and combat this issue. And I see a lot of money being spent on the issue, but it isn't coordinated. And what I would do is I would build a task force, a state task force that if called on by the state or by the, excuse me, by a municipality, say Anchorage wanted to get some help with how to deal with their homeless issue, then this group would come and we would collaborate and work together, and we would bring in all of the interested individuals and groups, and we would form a plan. I do have some very specific ideas for how it could be done, but I don't want it to be a top-down kind of thing. I want it to be something that's collaborative. I want it to be something where the citizens of, say, Anchorage for a community would be involved, and they would make these decisions, and we come up with a plan that really addresses the issues that are causing the homelessness. I mean, you see, I've heard as much as $80,000 per person per year is being spent on the homeless. And we do things like we spend, I heard that the $3 million was spent on housing the homeless in hotels over the winter. It's a great humanitarian thing to do for the moment, but it's never going to solve the problem. And so we're going to put together a task force and we're going to solve the problem. And that's going to eliminate a lot of the crime and those kinds of issues. And it's going to free up our police forces to do their job in other ways. They won't be pressured to do those things as well.
Sure. Let's go over to another different topic, energy and resource development. Obviously, very crucial for our state, makes up a very big, significant portion of the budget. Tell me a little bit about, we talked about hydrogen just a moment ago. Do you have any other policy proposals when it comes to really utilizing and getting the maximum benefit out of our energy and resource potential?
Well, first of all, historically, we've done very poorly with our resource development deals. Generally, we get a promise of jobs, which often turns out to be, as little as 30% and very rarely more than 50% of the jobs. And that's what we get along with taxes. And that is not enough to run a robust economy. You on 50% jobs, you can't, and no percentage of the profits, no profits, no control over production, which has caused us a great deal of problems, and no control over day-to-day operations. Well, I think that's not good negotiations. I've got 20 years of negotiating experience, and we're going to negotiate for some things like some profit sharing because that's solid and we'll get that money. And I think the tax structure is way in the favor of corporations, and it's been hurting Alaska for, well, since 2014. I mean, you can look at the record. You can see for yourself that we're losing $2-3 billion a year because of the tax structure that's currently in place. I'm not for it. I think we can do better. Um, we were doing better under the ACEs tax regime, and I think that we need to move in that direction. That will bring more of our natural resources development
Let's talk about the
back.
LNG. Yeah, well, let's talk about deals, right? The LNG pipeline is currently back in headlines as we're talking. It's July 23rd. I only flag that because by the time this comes out, things may have changed. But I want to ask you a little bit about what your thoughts are on this proposed LNG pipeline, what your thoughts are on the proceedings happening on it, and if you do become governor, you'll be taking up a significant portion of the future of the LNG pipeline. So I'm curious your thoughts on it and how you think it's best to move forward on it at this current moment where we're talking.
Okay, so in terms of that particular project, I don't have all the intricate details of that project, but I will say that I'm not real happy with the percentage that we're getting on that deal. Again, I think it's another deal where we're investing a great deal of money in this project, and we're coming away with what, 25% versus 75% for an outside corporation that's coming in to really kind of polish off the project. So we're getting a 25-75 split on something that we've invested so much money in. We're going to get no control over production. We're going to get very minimal, well, we're not going to get any control over day-to-day operations. So again, I think it's more of the same. I'm not against the project. I just want it to be a better project for Alaskans. And that means we need to get more profit. We need to get more control. And I think if we can get some shares in the corporation, I think that'll give us some control over production. Then that'll give us some control over day-to-day operations. For example, the Ambler Road project. The federal government gave $35 million and got 10% shares in the companies that are doing the mining. Now that's negotiating. We've already pledged 50 million to that project, and all we've gotten so far is a promise of jobs. Well, that's not good negotiations. We can do better than that.
And
So LNG, yes, but under certain conditions.
gotcha. And I have a few more questions. We're running a little bit close to time. I know you mentioned before you had some ideas on how to bring in more money for the state. Economic diversification has been something that I've heard from a lot of different candidates could be very beneficial to the state. What other industries are you looking to maybe really be able to bring in a lot of revenue for Alaska?
Well, first thing that popped in my mind is no data centers. First of all, I don't think there's any money in it, and second of all, I think it's a ecological disaster. So I'm just not interested in it. And so other, I think that we're going to have a lot of corporations that are going to want to come in and develop our resources, and I think that's great. And I think we need a completely different way of managing that too, to make sure that we're, like I said, getting some of these profit shares. I have some really kind of far right ideas, like there's a corporate company that's building helium airships. I don't know if you've heard of that, but these helium airships are capable of carrying 60 tons. They're very safe because helium is inert. It's not explosive. It's not the same old Zeppelins with the hydrogen. These are helium balloons. And I would like to see Alaska get involved in that. And we could build them here, and we could use them to access resources which are currently inaccessible. We could do so with minimal permitting paperwork. We could get to them much quicker, and then those resources would be available to Alaskans for their budgets, for their funding, much faster. I also would like to see, and this is another kind of a out there a little bit, but if it's what Alaskans want, I want to build an Alaskan co-op corporation. I'd call it Arctic, Alaska Resource Development Co-op Corporation. It would be run and operated by Alaskans. Being an Alaskan would make you a shareholder. That company then can do things which we as a state government cannot do. If it's an independent operating corporation, it has the same legal rights as any other corporation. That means we could control the jobs, so we could have 100% Alaskan jobs. We could have 100% of the profits come to Alaska. We could have 100% production control, 100% control of day-to-day operations, And that corporation will level the field when we're negotiating. Right now, we're in a really awkward position when we negotiate. When a company says they can't come unless we give them something, we're kind of stuck. If we had our own corporation, we could say, hey, you know what? Been nice knowing you, but we've got a corporation of our own and we can develop this if we have to. It never has to develop anything. As long as it's there for our trump card, it will help us in negotiations tremendously. Also, it will be able to take on projects which outside corporations will not do because they won't pass their profit sharehold, their profit threshold. So we could take on things like our own refinery for gas for Alaska, so we don't have to pay to ship it out and then pay more money when it comes back. We can bring down the price of fuels in Alaska, and that would greatly help our economy and lower our cost of living. And it's something that our own corporation could take on, and projects like that. So I
Yeah.
think it's a great idea, but it's an idea at this point.
Yeah, and I have three more questions, and we have about 3 minutes. These last few questions I'll kind of do in rapid fire bursts. This is the last policy question I have for you, and it's about ranked choice voting. Obviously, it's on the ballot. Alaskans get to decide whether they're going to have ranked choice votings after November. It'll be on the ballot in November. I'm curious what your thoughts are on ranked choice voting.
Well, I'm a Republican, and to get rid of ranked choice voting would work very well for me in terms of that. But is it a fair thing? Would it be fair to get rid of ranked choice voting? If you look at the voting population of Alaska, you have approximately 23% Republican, 11% Democrat, and 62% is nonpartisan. And if you close the primaries, then only these parties, these established parties like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, are going to be able to select your candidates for the ballot. Now, is that fair when 63% of the state is nonpartisan and they'll have no say? It's just not. It's just a fairness thing. That and the ballot measure has some other strings attached to it that have something to do with reporting of funding to different parties not having to report these funds. And I think we've done a lot of work to try and get things more transparent so we know where the money's coming from. And personally, I think the financial situation in terms of running for candidacy, I think it's deplorable. It should be. We need to level that playing field so you can choose your candidates based on what it is they have to offer, and not how much money they have in their campaign fund or how much political backing they have.
Yeah. Last two
So,
questions for
so,
you.
so did I tell you what I'm not for the getting rid
The
of
the
it. I
proposal.
like to keep it.
Gotcha.
I like to
Well,
keep it.
yeah, and last two questions for you, straying away from politics now. My last two questions for you is one, the first one, why should voters vote for you?
Well, they should vote for me because this isn't a stepping stone for me. I'm not a politician looking to, get to the big game and the federal game. I'm here because I'm here for my family and for my friends in this state. I'm here because I think that we deserve better than we've been getting. We need to, and yeah, I've got 6 children, 25 grandchildren, most of them living in this state, great many friends. And I want life in Alaska to be better for all of us.
My
And
last
that's it. Not
my
a
last
politician.
yeah, and my last question for you, sir, is what does it mean to be Alaskan?
What does it mean to be Alaskan? I think it's the freedom that Alaskans enjoy. You know, and it's our Constitution is just wonderful. It says that all of the natural resources of this state belong to us. So we're all wealthy because all of the natural resources and all of the funds that are produced from them are ours. And we've elected to give some of that money to our state government for its operation, and we've elected to keep a portion of it. But for our state constitution to say that this land is our land. I I think that says what it means to be Alaskan. This is our land.
James Parkin IV, I appreciate your time today, sir, and best of luck on your campaign.
Thanks, Will.